Welcome everyone, and thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate your time on what seems to be becoming another busy month. First off, I'd like to say that today I'm coming to you from Wiradjuri land in Melbourne. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we are all coming to today and joining together. And I would like to pay my respects to the elders past and present. And if you wish to, feel free to throw into the chat room which land you're on today. That'd be really, really great. Today, you might have noticed that we're in a Zoom meeting rather than, say, a Zoom webinar. Reasons. But in any case, today, if you would like to engage, ask your questions, chat to us, please feel free to do so. It's a nice small group, and I think these lovely individuals wouldn't mind hearing your lovely voices. But if you don't want to interrupt them, which I can understand, there is a lot of people, feel free to ask your questions in the chat. And then these folks will keep an eye on the chat and will be able to answer your questions as they come up. Now, we are recording the session, so please don't pick your nose unless you want that recorded. If you do not wish to be on camera or have your face or video recorded, please turn off your camera and audio. And you can still engage by asking your questions in the chat. The chat is not recorded, as in won't be in the video recording that we are hoping will get uploaded to YouTube once I get access to our YouTube account. So heading on to today. So you most likely joining us today because you already know what's going on. A few weeks ago, no, is it a few weeks ago? Yeah, Science Meets Parliament happened. I know, right? It doesn't seem that, yeah, it must have been longer than that, surely. Science Meet Parliament happened, and we had some lovely individuals who put up their hand to say, you know what, I want to go. And as part of our membership with STA, Science Technology Australia, we're able to send a few delegates along. So these folks have lovingly given up their time to come and share what they've learnt, and hopefully can share some knowledge as to, whether or not we want to do this ourselves in the future. Maybe we want to be a part of Science Meets Parliament 2024, or what we can do with the parliamentarians. But in any case, I won't hold the stage any longer. I'm going to pass off to Preeti to start the proceedings. But as you can see, we've got a lovely group of people here, Preeti, Claire, Phil and Adam, who are all at Science Meets Parliament. So usually I'd say give them a round of warm applause, but oh my gosh, still not used to webinars, even though I run them. Preeti, all up to you now.
Thank you, Joanna, and welcome everybody. This is just a very informal session, so I guess it was wonderful for us all to attend Science Meets Parliament, and the idea today is just to have a bit of an informal conversation and share what we learned, what we didn't learn, and perhaps what we saw as some gaps or opportunities. And we would welcome comments, ideas, suggestions from all our participants today. So I guess I'm happy to kick off and perhaps just give you an overview of what I got out of SMP as an individual, SMP being Science Meets Parliament. I know how much we all love acronyms. So I guess I did feel it was targeted more for psychon professionals perhaps earlier in their career. But having said that, I never miss an opportunity to, learn from wise words of others and hear what others have learned in their practice. And I guess there were some things that were reinforced for me. So I guess established good practice science comm and communications in general, which is, when we're dealing with government, it's really all about understanding what the priorities are of the government of the day and understanding the timing of what's being proposed, what changes are on the horizon, and making sure that whatever work we're doing in our science communication spheres, is aligned to that, particularly if we're wanting to engage with parliamentarians. And of course, the value of being structured in your approach and having a bit of a strategy, doing lots of prep, making sure you've got the right briefing notes that we've provided to members of Parliament and their officers, to their advisors, and of course, the power of being succinct, which in our line of work, we all know how important that is. But I guess something new that I did learn was the huge array of resources that are available online for everybody to access as part of doing, your homework. So, for example, having access to the Hansard records, so you can understand, who's speaking on what topic and where and when. So you start to get some idea of, which member of parliament is interested in the topic or in the area that you're working in, and of course how to get access to various committees and groups such as the Parliamentary Friends of Science. And obviously, they're very involved with Science and Technology Australia as well. So I guess just a couple of ideas in terms of what resources would be good to do a bit of homework with and how to approach some of those groups. So I guess that's, just a few points to kick off with. Perhaps I can throw that open to my other panelists if you'd like to share what you learned as an individual from SMP.
I just want to jump onto what you said about Parliamentary Friends of Science. Put a yes in the chat if you've ever heard of that before. Because I kind of maybe had, but I didn't really know what it was. And to be honest, maybe I'm still not sure. How could we use it, team?
I guess I agree with you, Phil. I hadn't heard of them either. And I'm not sure if our participants, I think there's a no from everybody. So clearly they could use some good communicators. But from what I know, they meet 3 or 4 times a year. They do invite speakers on various topics of, science and seek expertise. How you get on their agenda, I don't really know. But I think probably to kick off, we can all write to them and ask for a briefing. So
for a start, it's a kind of club for politicians who like science, and it's not politically aligned. And there's all kinds of different subjects. They have, parliamentary friends of, Swedish dumplings and parliamentary friends of, but the science one is one of the bigger ones and more long-standing. And I think maybe we should have someone from STA on this call. I think that's one of the kind of links where they have with STA. Tom's from Germany waving at us and saying yes. Yeah. Anyway, I think it in answer to Alison, was it set up by climate change? I think it was a lot earlier than that. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing. Anyway, it's a thing, and I want to stop talking because I don't know what I'm talking about. Just to say that it's a thing, and maybe there's a way we can kind of talk to people. But I mean, I guess that's one of the other things that I got from it is what an amazing resource being a member of STA is now for us, and we have so many connections and a really skilled little team of policy experts, science communicators, and so on in STA, Science and Technology Australia, which, in case you didn't know what that is a sort of umbrella body for all of the science institutes. So the Institute of Physics, Raki Chemistry, Ecological Institute, blah, blah, blah. And we have only just joined that now. Anyway, enough from me.
Adam, did you want to share? Would you like to share perhaps?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've been aware of Science Meets Parliament for years and years and years. I think being from Canberra, I was sort of aware of these Canberra things that take place on the hill. But I never thought it was a place for me because it was all about science and scientists, which I suspected possibly was early on. So I was curious about it, but never really curious enough to be involved. And when this opportunity came up, I thought, I want to do it. Just because I know that science communicators are now part of that ecosystem. And I've been having dealings with parliamentarians more and more over the last decade, and it's always a struggle. And it's like this magic thing that how do you get invited to meetings? How do you make meetings happen? Do you go straight to MPs? Do you go to advisors? What is the mechanism of this great democracy of ours? So I thought going to this would give me a sort of another insight. I'm not sure it did per se. It was very interesting listening to some of the talks that went on. They were quite inspiring. Basically hearing things like, science has never been more important. Well, I think they say that every generation, because science has never been so important as it is right now, all the time. Listening to the MP that I had a chance to meet was interesting. A new MP from country Victoria, and was very, very excited to be meeting the scientists and myself. And was very proud to say that he had a science degree, agriculture. And one of the things he was on a mission to do was to get rid of this notion that he keeps hearing around the place that science has it settled, which is encouraging to hear, because, for those of us, who carry on the mantra of what science is, science doesn't settle things. Science is never satisfied. Science is always saying, but what if? And, the message there that's not a weakness of science, but it's strength, that we don't know for sure, but we use the evidence. So it's encouraging to know we have an ally. How to use that? Maybe there's an opportunity to make a phone call which will be answered. We've met the MP, we've met the advisor. Did leave a little gifty, branded from Australian Science Communicators. So hopefully that stays on the desk. And it's like, are you still playing with the Lego? Keep the curiosity alive. So to answer the question personally, look, yes, I think I got out of it what I wanted out of it. The curiosity has been satisfied. At least I know I can contact somebody potentially through there. The general networking that I managed to do there was actually very good as well. In fact, it was one of the better sort of environments to do some really good networking, meeting people who are quite, focused on wanting to make some big changes, involve parliamentarians. So I found that quite valuable.
Excellent. Thank you, Adam. Claire, would you like to share? I think you met one of the members of Parliament. Are you happy to share?
I did. Yeah, I met.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, I met with a senator. But before I talk about that, I might just give a few sort of overview thoughts just for people who maybe didn't understand the format. So being involved in Science Meets Parliament was 3 days of online panel discussions and talks and one-on-one discussions and teachings and all sorts of things, speaking with scientists around the world in some cases, and in other cases having different experts sharing, their perspectives on how to do things well, with government. And there was a really interesting mix of speakers, and that was 3 days of online discussions and everything. But there's quite a few resources I think that we'll be able to share just with who was talking about what and who's leading in certain areas. So some of the topics discussed in there are things around even just truth telling around Indigenous knowledge, and there were things in there around engaging with the media, of course, and how Parliament works, and all of the, some of the details around cabinet submissions and all of, it's a really big knowledge base, I guess, which is really valuable, I think, just as an activity. And then of course there's the day actually in Parliament House where it's a whole range of things happening in a room where you're actually hearing people speak. So Chief Scientist Kathy Foley and Brian Schmidt, for example, had a one-on-one discussion, which I got a lot out of. I found that was just incredible. And then there were panel discussions talking about tech and other things. So, and then, you're sort of jumping out of the room to go and meet with parliamentarians and others in a group usually. So I met with Senator Jess Walsh, with two scientists, so a medical scientist and an associate professor and a PhD student in health and medicine. And Jess is fantastic. She actually has a PhD in human geography, and she is, you know, very switched on person, but was also amazing to talk to. So she really wanted to hear what it's like as individuals in our lives. So talking to the scientists and really understanding what it's like for them within their institutions, through their career, very, very engaged and interested. And I think that was something that I was struck by, that, you know, and I spoke to quite a few scientists as well, and technologists who are participating, who are, you know, fully in science research and, you know, right in that sort of academic world, you know, and most of them were blown away by how incredibly engaging their parliamentarian contacts were. And it's that point that they're people, they can talk to anyone, and they're actually really interested in what the people in front of them want to say. It's their job to sort of listen and learn and think about how they can use that in whatever they're doing, whether they're working on a policy or a Senate, you know, process, a committee that they're on. So that, I think that was really positive, and most of the scientists and technologists I spoke to were just, you know, in awe. You know, they haven't been to Parliament House before, they've never talked to a politician or a senior government person, whereas I think a little bit like Adam, what you were saying, because I live in Canberra usually, and I've worked a bit in government and other areas, and I engage with politicians now in business. Because I'm in business, it's sort of less, I mean, it's amazing still, I appreciate it, but it's not that kind of, oh, my knees aren't knocking as much. Whereas for some, I think some of the scientists and technologists were just like, oh my God, where am I? Which was great to see. I think they learned a lot. I'll stop there.
I think one of the key things I was thinking about as we were going through the online sessions and the live sessions on the day, I deal a lot in my day job with Western Australian politicians, and it's amazing to understand that the power actually does lie in the office, as in with the advisors. And I think, you know, listening to people talk in Canberra, it just reinforced for me how important it is to constantly keep your relevant advisors in the loop, keep them informed, engage early, engage consistently, because, you know, you're quite right, Claire, you know, the MPs are very well informed, they are curious, they do want to engage, they do want to learn, they want to understand and get across the issues of the day, but really it's the advisors who will delve down into the detail, who will quite often decide what's on the agenda and will help prioritise the issues. So I think it's a really, a really good tip for anyone involved in science and in science communication to ensure that the stakeholders are, you kind of include in your structured engagement or communications plan, keep the advisors in the loop and engage with them all the way through, rather than, you know, I guess just waiting to the end and wanting to get your topic of the agenda. I think it's just that much harder. And I think it was interesting, Claire, what you were saying about, you know, when you're actually face to face with a member of parliament, you have to be, you know, you're quite often in the room with other people, or you might be competing for their time. And I think in one of the SNP sessions, Kathy Foley, when she was talking, it might have been in that session that you mentioned with Brian Schmidt, and she talked about how important it was to have a collective voice. And I think for us at ASC, our voice is absolutely important, but, and I'm not sure how our participants feel, or how, you know, everyone else, what your perspective is on this, but I think we have to take every opportunity we can to leverage our partnerships, you know, with STA and others, to be able to kind of get the science communication agenda up across all fields. It may be a lot harder to do as we're a small group and, always tight on resources, but I think the more we can leverage our partnerships, the better it is. Phil, did you have any other insights that you would like to share?
Just picking up on what you said about keeping people engaged from the beginning. The thing that struck me, I met, I've forgotten his name, David, a Greens senator from New South Wales, who only just got in last year, but he had been local council and also state level, I think, so very experienced. He was across issues, and you have that classic scientist idea that only you know things and they don't, and he was talking about a number of different issues and saying, oh yeah, there's this and that and that, and it's not like they keep their head in the sand. They're scanning the horizon to see what's coming over it, and so they're aware of things all the time and getting their heads around them. So they want information that's up to date and reasonably nuanced. My understanding was from this guy who, was obviously a big supporter of science and maybe new and enthusiastic, but it doesn't need to be absolute, zero level, and they need to have it when they need it. We've got a briefing tomorrow night, or we've got a vote yesterday, and we need to know the answer to that, or some good info for that. So exactly how to interact with them, I don't know. I mean, my question for him was, where does he get his information from? And it wasn't clear. There wasn't one answer. I always go to Wikipedia, or I always ring my friend Bruce at UNSW. So they get briefing papers, they scan the newspapers, there's so much stuff going on, and they've got the team that does it as well in terms of advisors and so on.
They didn't talk about going to ChatGPT?
Beg your pardon?
They didn't talk about going to ChatGPT?
No, not at the exact moment. That might have happened 5 minutes later, I think.
Yeah, I asked
James
that
has just said David Shoebridge.
Oh,
thank you, James.
I asked that question to Jess's advisor about who do they go to for topics around science, technology, anything, but who do they go to? Who is their trusted source, or what do they do? And she said they frequently will go to science ministers, or the relevant minister in the state or territory. So if they're trying to find information, they use that existing network. So they'll go out to other government offices, and then she also said, plus organisations that they know of. So obviously STA or the Australian Academy of Sciences, and individuals that they know. So if they've got a trusted someone there, they will go out to them as well. But that was sort of almost tertiary, like the last, they tend to use their own government and political contacts, which I thought was interesting. But at the state and territory level, so we're talking to a federal senator, but I hadn't thought that they would do that.
Interesting. Adam, you met with Sam Birrell?
Yes, I should have mentioned. So it was Sam Birrell, who was the new guy there with the ag degree. Very keen to sort of make his mark, very keen to sort of promote industry. That's very big in sort of country Victoria. So that was part of the reason for him to be involved. I was also in a meeting with two others, young scientists, and geez, they picked them, two really, really bright people. Like, they've got awards coming out of whatever. Like, I mean, that I felt imposter syndrome with these clever young people, so, which is good for everyone. I mean, it's great for the parliamentarians to meet, these exciting new up and comings, because that's what they need to hear. They need to hear these success stories of early scientists and the direction they want to take their research, the impacts they're going to have on society. So I think that kind of story is exciting for the MPs, and it's exciting for as communicators to hear that, because we want to help, sell those stories. Especially if you got the young women there and others that you identify as underrepresented groups, find them and perhaps touch base with those guys down the track to say, hey, we met at Science Meets Parliament. I understand you're a Sydney-based, whatever. Perhaps I can get you involved in doing some work with our ASC, or spread their word a bit further as well. So yes, I did mention sort of the work that I'm involved in, sort of the grassroots, trying to, get young children involved in the partnerships with Inspiring Australia. I was very interested to hear about the Inspiring Australia program. So Alison and others, hopefully we've got someone who's going to keep an eye on that program and, push it forward for its next 10 years, which I know is, on the agenda. But I just had the opportunity to say, look, this is something that seems to work really, really well. Federal component, state component, and then grassroots component. Again, selling or telling those success stories, I think is really good for MPs, especially the new ones, to hear.
For sure. It's interesting, actually, and I think just leveraging what you've just said, Adam, and I think there's a question in the chat around, how can parliamentarians make use of science communicators? And thinking back to, the diversity of people that we met during those sessions online, as well as on the day at Parliament House, how do you define a science communicator, or who are these people who identify themselves as science communicators? There's people like me who do stakeholder engagement and communications. They are pure science communicators. There were researchers who identified as science communicators. I guess throwing it open to everybody as to, do you think parliamentarians think of science communicators when they want to better understand an issue, or they want to better roll out a campaign on an issue? Or are they going to a science expert and kind of the science communication happens accidentally? Not sure. What does everyone think?
One of the thoughts one of the take homes I got, and I can't remember who said it, was this notion of storytelling, that science communicators are either storytellers themselves because they're telling stories on behalf of, or they can find the appropriate expert to tell their story, and perhaps they've offered the training that's required. But that was my thought, that the science communicators are more the storytellers. Do MPs want storytellers? Possibly not. They possibly want to hear things from the horse's mouths. So yes, there's a bit of a call on whose story needs to get to the MP, by close of business.
One of the things that struck me is that I think many science communicators have a breadth of experience, and we also have a breadth of understanding different contexts and how those contexts might interact with each other. So on the flip side, there might be researchers who have only ever gone very deep in their field of expertise. And I think that marrying the two provides opportunities. And I think so a parliamentarian who is covering different topics all the time, I mean, they're covering a breadth of things in a year or a sitting period. That is where I think science communicators really can shine, because we can understand what they're after. We can understand the policy context. We can understand the different language sets that are used by different aspects of government, policy, whatever it is, and play that translation role and see, and know, oh, well, there's a science group over in this area doing that, and there's a science group over here in this area doing that. And you know, have you talked to them? Oh, no, we haven't. You know, I think that that's actually an amazing thing that a great amount of value that science communicators can bring. And I'll just add as well, there was quite a bit of discussion throughout the 3 days online, but also at the face-to-face, talking about, you know, this kind of encouragement or imploring of scientists to, you know, tell your story and engage with kids, and, you know, you talk in the media and all this sort of stuff. And I was just thinking, I've heard that for 20 years. And I wanted some of the leaders in these organizations to be able to say, we need you to do this, and this is how we're incentivizing this. This is how we're making it possible for scientists and technologists in these different organizations to do this. This is how we're guiding that to happen, rather than sort of asking for it. I feel like that's a gap. I feel like that's where ASC and science communicators can really step in and say, look, we need to bridge these gaps. This is how we can do it. This is how you can invest. This is how we can have an impact.
Yeah, clearly a lot of people think it's very important. I mean, the very first thing on the first session on the Hill was the Brian Schmidt, Kathy Foley thing. And Kathy asked Brian, where are we at in the broad sweep? And the first thing he says is, oh, well, we need to get our science out there more than ever. And it's like, hello, science communication. And so many people are, you know, like you say, Preeti, that's people who are researchers who do a bit of communication. They start putting science communication in their you know, resume or their footer of their email and stuff like that. And it's a bit haphazard, and there's not a real, like you say, it's not incentivized. You know, my experience working in a university is that when I want to get a researcher's story out there, they first have to get their teaching done. Then, you know, they get research and write the papers up, get the papers published. Then they've got admin stuff to do and students to look after. And then actually helping me get a story on the website or as a media release is a distant, you know, 10th for them. And there's no sort of organized way for that to happen in a way. I mean, Inspiring Australia is a kind of grassroots way of doing it, but I don't know, it just strikes me that it's really, it's such an afterthought. And I would love to, and this is what I submitted to the review of the ARC, to try and find some way to bring things up, plan them from the beginning, make them actually a bit more organized. So
yes, I think you're both right, Claire and Phil. I think it's so easy for organizations and people to say, you know, put the science out there, you know, simplify it, tell the story. I think people are doing that. I don't feel that that's what's missing. I think what's missing is having that end user perspective and thinking about the purpose for why you're telling the story. So, you know, if you're looking for government investment, it's a very different story. If you're looking for private investment in your science, that's a different story. If you're doing outreach with schools or with you know, undergrad students, it's a very different story. And I think until we kind of, you know, tighten that lens as to who we are aiming for, I think you're right, Phil, it's going to kind of just sort of, the stories, you know, it might be a beautiful, compelling story, but it's just going to diffuse. I know certainly in my work, and I think as I listen to people speak during the SMP sessions, I thought how I could refine my own approach. And quite often what I do is, I guess we all are very good at talking about ourselves and our organizations and our research and our project, whereas really what we should be doing is thinking about what problem of the end user are we actually solving with our work. And to me, that's what helps define my messaging and the story that I'm creating. So if I'm, I guess, putting out or developing a plan for a piece of work, but we're appealing to private industry investment, then it's all about understanding their priorities, their challenges, and how those problems can be solved. And I think, again, in a lot of the SMP sessions that we're talking about, understand the priorities of government, understand, what changes are afoot, and modify and align your story to suit. And timing is important. Talk to the right people at the right time. So, yeah, I think it's easy to say, make it exciting, make it palatable. Of course, it has to be plain English, but I think that plain English has to be, is it a business message on return on investment? Is it a social good message? I mean, it's got to be a bit of everything, but, what's the emphasis depending on who we're trying to talk to? But anyway, interesting. Participants, please feel free to keep your questions coming. Is there anything we've missed, Adam, Phil, Claire? I mean, do we think there were gaps in what could have been presented to help science communicators in their work in these sessions that we attended? Were there gaps or, perhaps feedback we can provide in terms of next year's event?
Yeah, it was an interesting mix, the 3 days of training from STA, which went from very, very simple to some really quite sort of under the covers industry. Like there was a fantastic one where we met supposedly 4, was it, parliamentarians were going to get on the blower and have a chat with us. And then the bells rang, which means there's a vote, which means they have to run to the chamber. Suddenly we just lost, and we were down to 1 who had managed to get somebody else to do a proxy for her or something. And fortunately, Misha Schubert, the CEO of STA, jumped in as well with Jazz and who do you recall who that remaining parliamentarian was? She was rural, wasn't she? National Party even? But yeah, she was really interesting just to find out, what her day looks like, how she gets her science, how she applies it. So those kind of, for me, you fly on the wall, kind of really hearing from the proper people were super valuable. Whereas the kind of science communication 101 obviously is stuff that we all know. But I guess it gave me a perspective a reminder that a lot of people don't know that. Even though we, like you say, Claire, we've been swimming in that for the last 20 years, there's still a lot of people who it doesn't reach.
Mm.
Now that you've done SMP, will anything change for you? Well, I've changed my background.
You're on location. Great to see.
For me, no, I don't think so. I mean, in some ways, not. I don't know. Maybe in the future, I will find a need for it, but to date, no.
Yeah, I'm with Phil on that. I mean, I was curious. I went. Would I go again? No, not necessarily. Not in this kind of form. Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, again, there was the other pickup I got, and again, this has been bandied about, but I'm getting a bit more context again, having listened to my colleagues here speaking, and this notion of knowledge broker or knowledge broking. I don't know if that's a thing yet, or people just use it, and maybe that's a terminology that ASC plays around with. The idea is that, we help break down the silos between research institutes. We help facilitate, knowledge from the coalface to the MPs. Is that a thing? Is it a research area? I don't know. Put that out to the group to say, is that something that we can explore and find a use, or is it a tool?
Yeah, it's an interesting aspect, Adam, because I think, knowledge translation is a whole field of work in itself, and knowledge brokers, there are people out there that identify as knowledge brokers, but if they're in the science area, do they identify as a science communicator? Let's not go there, right? It's a big discussion, I think. Yeah, and it's a good discussion to have. And I think it's interesting that, you know, we all have different backgrounds, and we also talked to different people that were there who are from very deep science areas, and so we were picking up on what it meant for them, but what it meant for us as an individual, or what it might mean for ASC, all sort of different lenses to look at the experience through. I think for me, some of the higher level discussions and hearing some of the MPs talk as well, that was most valuable for me, because it just validated some of the things that I've been observing over the years, and sort of going, oh, it feels like, you know, I think it's this, but no one had ever kind of validated it for me. So there was really great speakers. And I mean, to have, you know, Kathy Foley and heads of these organisations speaking, and I mean, it's a fantastic event. I think it should definitely be something that is supported going forward. I mean, the stats that I put into the chat, that 40% of parliamentarians were part of this event in general, is, I think, really great. And it was a record as well. So it's the biggest event that it's been ever. So yeah, I think some of the comments about Australia's research system being really siloed and being the most siloed in the world was, you know, a challenge, I guess, to hear those things. I still feel like there is a lack of awareness around science communication and what individuals who are professional science communicators actually do. And how they offer value. And maybe it's because Science Meets Parliament has come from a science and technology, you know, the technical experts getting in touch with parliamentarians, and we're kind of sitting in the middle going, oh, we can help, we're part of this. But we're, you know, it's not a clear-cut distinction. Maybe that's what makes it a little bit more challenging, but I think there's an opportunity perhaps for ASC to play a role in some of the panel events, definitely to influence some of the leaders who are talking about the needs for the way that scientists communicate their work. And, you know, there were some great science communicators that were featured already in those sessions.
I think there's definitely that gap that I saw. I mean, universities are putting so much pressure on individual researchers to communicate their own work, to go, you know, obviously find their own funding. So I think from a university perspective, definitely they see science communication as a role that everyone should play in their own field. So quite often they don't think of a science communicator or as a separate individual or as a separate skill to the day job. So perhaps a role for ASC and our members is to work closely with Science and Technology Australia and others to help upskill other members on science communication. And that doesn't mean that it shrinks the pool of work available to us. On the contrary, I think it would boost the value that we have and the value that we offer, not just in a practice, but in an advisory role as well. And I think, Claire, what you were saying about, you know, it's not just about, you know, here's this piece of complicated physics. Sorry, Phil, I'm not a physics person, but, you know, here's this complicated bit of science. Now go, you know, talk in plain English. You know, as you've all said, I think what members of ASC provide in terms of our skill set is that wider perspective of, you know, the framing of that science and what it means in relation to what's happening in community, what's happening in government, what's happening in, you know, kind of the global context, and why that piece of work is important. So I think definitely, you know, we need to work closely with others to kind of help ASC have the voice, and definitely a group voice is better than, you know, a small group trying to get noticed. Let's see, what other questions do we have? Have we missed anything, fellow panelists? Or do we want to touch on anything else?
I'm just going to jump in on
Yes,
what Claire was. Well, it's kind of been a theme about how do you define a science communicator, and ever since I joined ASC 20 years ago, the same discussion comes around, and whoever's kind of asking the question says, "Oh, they're people like me, but they're not like, you know, her or him or them." But the point is, don't gesticulate with headphones on. There we go. The point is, we're so diverse, and there are so many different ways that people communicate. You know, are they people who are communicating their own research, or people who are being paid to do it, or people who are doing freelance? And I always thought it would be a great thing if ASC could be, you know, every year providing a set of Psychom 101 courses for people around the country to get them, you know, get them a little bit fired up. But it's something that's never quite come off. But, you know, maybe by engaging with STA, we can actually make that happen.
I think one of the issues is that it's really interesting to hear, I went to ANU a couple of years ago, and Brian is always talking about, tell stories, share stories, and we know facts don't win arguments, it's stories, we win hearts and minds, blah, blah, blah. But of course, the really big problem is that parliamentarians monitor mainstream media and social media, and our stuff rarely trends unless it's a possible miracle cure for something or the latest bullshit weight loss something. So there's something there, I think, in the role of the ASC to continue to, lobby, campaign, mention at every opportunity that the mainstream media doesn't really cover science well, and that is a problem, which is how we end up with the climate debate. And I'm just asking questions about vaccines. And so perhaps there's something there in terms of our presence at things like Science in Parliament, where we talk about, it's really important that we tell stories, but it's also really important we have places to tell them, because as we all know, it's really hard now to get your message out, because, you spend money to be on a platform you don't own and could just disappear tomorrow. You build an audience on a social media platform that the government just decides, rightly or wrongly, this isn't the forum, to ban on all government devices. So there's a real problem, I think, with the disconnect between we need to tell our story and there actually being places to tell them, where people who aren't us and read the conversation or subscribe to Cosmos magazine or, subscribe to various newsletters with science stuff. How do we get on Channel 7 News? How do we get on breakfast radio? How do we appear in media monitors that parliamentarians are going to pay attention to? Because we have large audiences in really niche places that most parliamentarians don't know exist. And I think that is a real issue. Like Claire Petty was a science journalist at The Advertiser here in Adelaide for a really long time, and then she quit and they've not replaced her. Something Murdoch Press, but they've just not replaced her, so we did stand a chance of getting some sciencey stuff into the local paper here, but now you have to go through the news desk, or sometimes the business or the education person might answer your email. So, yeah.
I believe the trick is, in terms of getting your science story into the media, is that you need penguins. Something cute and cuddly.
Yep, yeah. Every reptile researcher I've ever met says, yeah, I've never been on TV because I don't do mammals. Yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
I think that was kind of the gist of that media discussion on one of the sessions. You need a hook that's cute and cuddly.
Unfortunately, most science isn't.
I guess one of the things that Science Meets Parliament really highlights is connections that MPs have in their local region, and then the connections that they have across different portfolios. And so really narrowing in on who's the local member, getting the scientists to engage at the local level, or looking at what committees are going on at the moment or what inquiries are happening, and even just approaching people that have a particular interest. And obviously, if they're a minister of a particular portfolio, but then also, that thing of having people in the community actually talking to their MP. So they're not from the science organisation, but how can you influence other stakeholders to then,
Yeah, maybe it's about, just inviting the relevant or local MPs to all of the things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's that push and pull of communications, comms 101, isn't it? That why do we want to get a story in the media? If we're looking, for example, to inform or influence policy, the flip side to that is you actually try and influence the end person that's going to impact the community, and they're the ones then asking for something to happen.
I think this is a good place to finish up. We've got 5 minutes till 6 minutes till the end of the session. And so I just want to say really thank you so much all for your time. And it was really lovely to hear all of your insights. And it sounds like ASC has a lot to do again. So it's great to hear that, there are things that we can be doing to help out, and maybe it is that we are talking more to STA to see if there's a channel there to help out. I attended a Superstars of STEM session. I was like, you know what? Why isn't it a science communicator giving some of these sessions? Instead, they've got a PR person doing it. Nothing wrong with that, but hey, might be nice to have a science communicator. So I'll keep that in the back.
I'm not a PR person.
Why can't be both? No, this PR person did not know about the sciences. So I was just like, maybe you should have a bit of science as well. Hey, it's a whole field. You might know about it. Anyway, so thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending and for your time. Next steps, what we're going to do is I'm going to try and get this recorded and put this onto a platform where we can access it later for those who would like to. These lovely 4 people have promised me a blog post. No pressure. Thank you. So hopefully maybe they'll have that in the next scope newsletter for us to be able to have a little look at for those who prefer to read rather than listen. And so on that note, I'm going to say thank you. And hey, feel free to reach out to these people. I'm sure they want to talk to you more about this stuff. No, I did not just push you all in deep end. Thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your night. Bye,
and
everyone.
thanks, Tom and Joanna, for actually making it all happen as well.
Thank
You're doing a great job.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.